Okay, so um, Maya just got back from her trip, and we have so much to talk about today.
We really do. I mean, we've got her handwritten travel journal, her frantic voice note she was sending us, and basically our entire group chat log to go through.
Right, and we're using all of that to look at what happens when things just go totally off script. Welcome, everyone. This is just Johnny and Sophie.
Real conversations.
Real English.
Every day.
Today, our mission is to trace the chaotic, funny, and honestly pretty profound moments of our friend Maya's first big trip abroad in 2 years. We're going to look at cultural differences, what happens to your brain when you're navigating a new environment, and we'll extract 3 essential English phrases along the way.
Yeah, treating her journal as our primary source is great because we get to look past those standard, curated vacation photos. We can
Mm,
actually observe the mechanics of adapting to an unfamiliar culture, which is highly relevant for anyone listening right now who is immersing themselves in learning English.
exactly. But to set the stage for you guys listening, we need to talk about Maya's usual personality. Because she is dramatic. I love her. But she's expressive, she overprepares for literally everything, and she tends to view experiences as either the absolute best thing ever or the absolute worst thing ever.
Right. There's very little middle ground with Maya, which means her threshold for uncertainty is notably low. Going into this trip, she had a meticulous list of variables she intended to control: transit schedules, specific restaurants, you name it.
Which brings us to day one, the arrival.
Hmm.
So she lands, and according to her voice notes, the second she stepped out of the airport, she was just hit with this overwhelming wave of sensory data. She said the air smelled different, the noise of the city had this unfamiliar rhythm, and she was just completely overwhelmed in the best possible way.
And that phenomenon is actually rooted in how the brain processes stimuli. Usually, our brains use something called sensory gating. We filter out the vast majority of routine information so we can function without being exhausted.
Hmm.
But when you travel to a completely novel environment, you lack the predictive models for those new sights and sounds. So the sensory gates just open wide, and you get a massive spike in cognitive load.
Wow, so that completely explains why she said she was so physically exhausted that first afternoon. I just chalked it up to jet lag. But she was basically processing millions of new data points. So she's dealing with this sensory spike, and she decides she needs food. She finds a local cafe, walks in, sits down, and realizes the menu is entirely in another language.
Not a single familiar word to anchor to.
Exactly. And for someone who relies on preparation, this is usually where she would panic. But she was so hungry, she just pointed her finger at a completely random block of text on the menu, smiled at the waiter, and just hoped for the best.
It's a fascinating bypass of her usual need for control. She just surrendered to the outcome.
She really did. When the plate arrived, she had absolutely no idea what it was. But she took a photo, sent it to our group chat, and ate the whole thing anyway.
And looking back at the group chat reactions to that photo is so funny because it perfectly shows our friend group's different
Oh
personalities.
my gosh, yes. Marcus immediately replies, "What is that?" Maya responds, "I don't know, but it's the best thing I've ever eaten."
Hmm.
And then Dan, in classic Dan fashion, replies to this major moment with a simple lowercase, "Okay." 2 full days later.
2 days later, classic Dan. But that specific cafe incident actually perfectly illustrates our first English expression for today, which is to be out of your comfort zone.
Let's break that down for the listeners.
Sure. So your comfort zone is basically your state of cognitive ease. It's the mental space where your brain operates on autopilot because you know what to expect, you know the language, you understand the menu, you feel safe.
Right, so to be out of your comfort zone means you're in an unfamiliar, challenging situation that goes way beyond what feels safe or predictable.
Exactly. You are forced into active, high energy processing. So you might say, traveling alone puts you out of your comfort zone, or taking that new job really pushed me out of my comfort zone.
And what's important is that being out of your comfort zone is exactly when you grow, which Maya definitely did on day one. But day two brought a whole different level of complexity. She went from tangible challenges like ordering food to invisible social rules.
Ah, yes, the cultural misunderstanding.
The famous smiling story.
Mhm.
So day two, Maya is walking around a residential neighborhood. She's feeling pretty confident after the cafe success. She makes direct eye contact with a stranger walking past her, and she gives him this huge, warm smile.
And the stranger just looks at her normally without smiling back at all.
Just a completely blank stare.
Mhm.
Maya was utterly convinced she had committed a massive social faux pas. She spent 20 minutes stressing, thinking, did I stare weirdly? Did I insult them?
Which is such a natural reaction when your baseline social rules are suddenly violated.
Right. She actually called me that night, and we talked for 45 solid minutes just about this one interaction. She was like, wait, isn't a smile universal? How is that wrong?
And that is a critical distinction to make. While the physical act of smiling is a universal human reflex, the social rules about when and who you smile at are heavily regulated by culture. Maya just assumed that acknowledging another person with a smile is the default setting of politeness everywhere.
But she found out later that in this specific culture, smiling at strangers just isn't the default behavior. It wasn't a personal rejection, it was just different. They view unearned smiles as a bit inauthentic or intrusive.
Yeah, sociologists look at this through the lens of cultural dimensions. Some cultures have high affective expression, meaning they constantly signal emotions to keep things smooth. Other cultures are more neutral, reserving those expressions for actual close relationships. Neither system is wrong. They are just entirely different operating systems.
Which is such an important lesson for anyone learning English or moving to a new country. You aren't just learning vocabulary. You have to learn a whole new set of social rules.
Right, and it requires so much cognitive flexibility. When a stranger doesn't smile back or someone's email seems really direct, you have to override your immediate emotional reaction. You have to realize, oh, this isn't an insult, this is just a different rule of engagement.
It's hard, though. You are basically unlearning decades of muscle memory about how humans are supposed to interact. But once Maya realized this, it completely changed her trip. Which brings us to day 3, and honestly, the best decision she never made.
The public transport mishap.
Yes. So she confidently marches onto the local train, feeling very proud of herself. 25 minutes into the ride, she checks her phone map and realizes she is traveling in the completely wrong direction.
Now, for someone like Maya, who usually relies on strict itineraries to manage her anxiety, that kind of mistake would normally trigger a full meltdown.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But because she had already survived the sensory overload and the smiling panic, she just kind of let it go. She got off the train in a random neighborhood that wasn't in any guidebook.
She leaned into the loss of control.
And it was the highlight of her trip. She stumbled upon this small local market, ate incredible street food, and ended up talking to a local vendor for an hour, using just hand gestures and broken words. When she texted me later, she literally said, "Getting lost was the best decision I never made."
Getting lost was the best decision I never made. That is such a great realization. And it introduces our second English expression perfectly, which is to go with the flow.
I love that phrase. We use it all the time. But let's define it clearly.
To go with the flow means accepting things as they happen without trying to control everything. It's about situational adaptability. When we plan things, we create this rigid mental structure. If something breaks that structure, like getting on the wrong train, our brain panics.
Right.
Going with the flow means instantly dropping that rigid plan and just accepting the new reality without resistance.
So it's shifting your energy from trying to force the situation to match your plan to just figuring out how to enjoy the situation you are actually in.
Precisely. And in travel, getting lost by accident often forces a deeper level of engagement than just blindly following a GPS line to a museum. You might say to a friend who is stressing out, hey, we don't have a reservation. Let's just go with the flow and see what's open.
Or if you're practicing English and you forget a word halfway through a sentence, you can't freeze up. You just have to go with the flow, use whatever words you do know, and keep communicating.
Exactly. Communication over perfection. And, looking at our broader friend group through this lens of control versus going with the flow is actually hilarious.
Oh, it's a completely different spectrum for all of us.
Yeah.
So Maya overprepares, has a mini freak out, but then adapts and comes back with the best stories.
Right. Whereas Marcus represents the extreme opposite. He has an incredibly high tolerance for ambiguity. He operates with basically zero plan.
Literally zero. Remember when he showed up at the airport with his passport, no ticket, and just looked at the departure board to pick a flight, and it somehow actually worked out for him?
It's wild. He is completely comfortable existing with unresolved variables. He just figures it out. But then you contrast him with Lily.
Oh, Lily. Lily plans trips using a massive color-coded spreadsheet. Every single hour is accounted for, and she has backup plans for her backup plans.
Yet she still manages to have great trips. Her strict structure doesn't ruin the fun. Because her anxiety is managed by the spreadsheet, she's actually free to relax. She finds her comfort zone inside the data.
That is so true. And then finally we have Dan. Dan traveled alone to Europe once. Over 2 weeks, he sent exactly 3 photos to the group chat. When he got back and we asked how it was, he just said, "It was good." To this day, nobody knows what actually happened on that trip.
He is a complete informational black hole. But, talking about these different travel styles, Maya's adaptation, Marcus's chaos, Lily's spreadsheets, it connects so directly to what our listeners are doing right now.
How do you mean?
Well, many of the people tuning in want to travel to English-speaking countries, or maybe they already have. And validating that feeling of having to use a new language in a new place is so important. It is highly uncomfortable. It's exhausting, but it's also incredible.
Definitely. Wondering if you're using the right tone or if you accidentally violated an invisible social role. It's scary.
But just by tuning into this show and actively practicing your English, you are preparing for that exact moment. You are building your tolerance for that ambiguity so you can handle the unpredictable stuff when it happens.
Which is exactly the shift we saw in Maya when she finally came home.
The aftermath.
Yeah. She came back fundamentally changed. We were getting coffee, and she looked at me and said, "I thought I knew what different looked like. I didn't."
That is a profound statement. It shows a complete shift in her perspective. Her previous idea of different cultures was probably just based on movies or books, but the physical reality of navigating those unwritten rules shattered her old framework.
Which brings us to our third and final English expression for the day, which is an eye-opener.
An eye-opener is an experience or piece of information that reveals something completely new and changes how you see things. It opens your eyes to a reality that was invisible to you before.
So you could say learning about their culture was a real eye-opener. Or realizing how native speakers actually use idioms in real life was an eye-opener.
It's a great phrase because it makes you sound instantly natural and thoughtful. And clearly, Maya's trip was an eye-opener because it didn't scare her away from traveling. It actually made her want to go back out there.
Oh, she's already planning the next one. Lily asked her yesterday if she had started a spreadsheet for it yet, and Maya very proudly confirmed that she does, and it already has 14 tabs.
14 tabs. She is combining Lily's spreadsheet methodology with her own newfound ability to go with the flow.
An unstoppable combination, honestly. So as we wrap up this exploration of Maya's trip, we have a specific challenge for you this week. We want you to actively look for an opportunity to use the phrase, an eye-opener, in your daily life.
Yes, think about a recent or past experience that completely changed your perspective, whether it's related to learning English or just life in general, and use that phrase to describe it.
It's a great way to practice sounding natural.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked about how Maya discovered that her default setting of smiling at strangers wasn't a universal rule.
Right.
I want you to consider what your own hidden default settings are in your daily life. What are the completely invisible rules of interaction you are living by right now that would suddenly become glaringly obvious if you stepped off a train in the wrong neighborhood?
Wow. That is a deeply provocative thought to end on. Examining your own assumptions is such a huge part of learning a new language and culture. Thank you so much for joining us today and exploring this journey with us. Make sure you come back for the next show because things are going to get interesting.
The digital experiment.
Exactly. Our friend Lily, the architect of the 14-tab spreadsheet, decided to completely delete Instagram from her phone for exactly 1 week. True to form, she had a detailed plan and backup activities. But let me tell you, day 3 was way harder than she expected.
I cannot wait to break down what happened there.
It's going to be a good one. We'll see you next time on Just Johnny and Sophie.